This is the big myth about parenting, is that we know it, we're going to get it right and it's perfect all the time. It's not. I remember flipping through the phone book going, where can I run away to? I just need to get out of here. I parented in a way that gained control. I managed my house like a boarding school. We're not robots. We get it wrong. We stuff it up. We're human. We react. The research tells us now that, there's over like 40% of parents feel overwhelmed and anxious, and that impacts how they parent, and they're not parenting how they want to parent.
You grew up on a farm. You are.
Yep.
I'm number 2 of 4 boys. You're number 4 of 5 kids.
Correct.
That's a noisy house. You describe yourself as a fairly sensitive little girl. You were told pretty regularly, stop crying, toughen up, which I understand. Like, I get it why you would want to say that. Well, certainly when you're in the thick of it. What was it like to be that kid in a family that's got, 3 elder siblings who are off to the races and being told things like that?
Yeah, it's a good question. It was, at the time, my mum and dad were really busy, so it was kind of, everyone's getting on with the job of farming. But for me, it was really hard because I couldn't work out why people wouldn't listen, or why everyone just wanted to move off the feelings that I had. So, I remember I used to help with the lambs, and I loved all the animals, and so when I had a pet lamb and it would die, Mum would just be like, "Oh, you'll be right. It's okay. Just, get on with it." And my brothers would be like, "Well, God, it's only a lamb. Just, move on." And so feelings for me, it wasn't safe really to share the sensitivity that I had. It wasn't safe to be sad. Although my mum was a beautiful, loving woman, and she was probably the only one that I felt really kind of got me in those moments. What I made it mean essentially was that there was something wrong with me, that I was the problem, I was the issue. And so then went on to kind of hide my feelings and hide my sensitivity and not share.
Let's be really fair to all parents of the generation above us. They were doing the best they had with the latest research at the time.
Correct.
All right? It's not like they were being horrible people.
No.
That was just like, this is how you deal with kids. This is what you do when they're naughty. This is what you do when they're being noisy and screaming and crying, and no one would look otherwise. If anything, that was it.
Yeah, well, kids were seen and not heard. And
Yeah.
My dad actually was a principal of the primary school as well as being a farmer. And I know that there were times when he got the strap out and hit kids still then. And I remember talking to him about it. He felt awful about it, but that was kind of what he did.
So how did you go from being this kid to building a career as a person whose main message is children's feelings deserve to be recognized and validated and heard, and they're very important signals for us?
Yeah. It took me a long time really to kind of work out that it wasn't actually something wrong with me, that actually what I had was this superpower of sensitivity. So I went on to do teaching after I finished school, and just kind of felt like there wasn't kind of the right career for me. And then when my own mum passed away, I really had a moment of kind of going, what is my purpose? What am I meant to be doing? I was 34. I had 2 little people, a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old. And I really struggled with the whole parenting thing. And what I actually did was kind of quit my very sensible teaching job, and just sort of went and saw a friend of mine who was a life coach and said, I don't know what I'm meant to be doing here, but this is not it. And all I could really come up with at the time, through my grief and through my kind of search for who I was that I just wanted to help people. And when I learnt about family therapy, it was like putting a pair of glasses on, like a new pair of glasses, and I could actually see the world. And it was this idea of systems theory, so that we are all connected, that whatever happens in families, particularly whatever happens to one person impacts another person. And so my my whole world opened up, and this whole new language about what happens to us in families and how we impact each other really kind of came. I could see it really clearly, and so in that I learned a lot about my own family. You have to kind of look inside and have a scrounge around in there and work out what are your patterns, what are your roles in a family, what happened to you as a child, and how's that impact who you are. So it was a very incredibly amazing course, and I just lapped it up and just loved it.
I'm aware that this might be the first time someone's heard the word family systems or even considered that the relationship they have with their own parents or with their partner or with their own parents, their partner and their kids is a system. Could we just kind of talk about that a bit and maybe explain it a bit for someone who've never heard this before?
Yeah, absolutely. The way I like to describe it is, a baby's mobile that you hang over the cot, and when you pull one side of the mobile, the whole thing moves, and then all the little bits jiggle and wiggle until there's kind of a settling again, and then if it knocks again. So the idea is that we are not alone. We're not individual. That we are actually connected. I like to think about that we're connected by threads, if you like. And when we pull one thread, something else happens, people change. So if you think about it, when your son comes home and, he's kind of had a bad, shitty day at school and maybe throws his bag down, then, and you kind of you might just be at home going, oh, having a great day today. And he walks in and you kind of feel it. You feel the something, in your own nervous system that happens. And so then you change, you might go, hey, come on, what are you doing there? Pick your bag up. And so you're already impacted by what's happened to him. So that impact is kind of what we're talking about. The system feels things. And in families, we all play different roles. We all change. When something happens to somebody. So maybe when a parent's feeling anxious or even when someone dies or something, there's a change in how people behave. And systems theory is that we are all connected, that we all change and adapt to kind of steady the system no matter what else is going on.
And as this is not something that we do deliberately, it just kind of happens. We may not realize that we're in it. If both your parents were working all the time and now one of them's out of work and there's a lot of money stretched in the house, the kids may not realize why they're getting into trouble at school all the time.
Correct. Yeah. It's an unconscious way that we adapt.
How can we be there for them and yet not be too affected by it so we can still be there for them?
There's this beautiful thought in family therapy. Virginia Satir was kind of a real pioneer of family therapy. And the idea is that we're all actually perfect. We are all, as we are just beautiful human individuals, yeah? And we are all connected in different ways. So what she teaches is that we never come looking at each other in relationships thinking that the other is broken, that we think that they have everything they need inside them. We just need to be there to support them. So, I never walk into a therapy room or a session thinking, I'm going to fix somebody, because that's not my role. My role is to guide and listen and just know that the people have inside them everything they need to be able to handle the situation or to manage what's happening for them.
It must be, it would have been terrible at the time. However, to have your own personal experience of being in your early 30s with two little kids and your mum, who I'm assuming you went to, and I'm not assuming, you wrote about this, you went to your mum when parenting got hard and she was there with a bit of guidance. Old school as it was there, and it was, at least there was some certainty about it. To have that experience is one thing, but I'm just kind of interested to know what that was like for you. When you look back at the woman you were without all this knowledge, and suddenly this gigantic part of your mobile is just gone. What was that like for you?
It was, probably the worst ever moment of my life. And it happened suddenly, and we had no real I had no way to prepare myself for it. And I didn't know what to do after she passed. And there was so many grieving adults. So my siblings, my dad, all grieving in their own different ways. And I suppose what I tried to do was I well, when you can't control something, when something like, so unexpected happens that your mum dies suddenly, there's this innate kind of feeling that I need to control something now. I've got to control everything because all of a sudden everything felt so out of my control. So I parented in a way that gained control. I managed my house like a boarding school. I had the menu planners with the days and the rotation of weeks, and I had, play dates set up, and the house was spotless, and, it was regimented, and everything felt better when I could feel like I was in control. The trouble is I had a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old, and what happens when you try and control a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old is that, it's impossible. So what I kept bumping up against was these kids that I would say was naughty. I was yelling. I was not playful at all. I was no kind of joy in that space. So what happened is they started to kick back, and the more they kicked back, the more upset and kind of out of control I became, until one day I remember my husband was working, and I was standing at the kitchen bench and just was like, I need to leave. And we had phone books in those days. So I remember flipping through the phone book going, where can I run away to? I just need to get out of here. And that was kind of the moment where I kind of sank to the floor and went, there has to be a better way. There has to be.
Thank you so much for sharing that, because what you just described, I can certainly relate to, and that feeling of like the kid's just the kid. You mentioned they're 2, they're 4, they're going to be what they're going to be. The problem is, like with many things in life, it is my expectation of how things should be versus the behavior of this person who doesn't have a prefrontal cortex nor any impulse control. I cannot be upset with them because that part of their brain is literally not grown yet. But I also understand that in that moment of grief, some amount of predictability, some amount of agency, some about if I just keep the cutlery drawer cool, then I've got my universe feels a little less all over the shop. That's really hard. But it seems to be it's the comparison moment between what you had in your home and some version of what you thought it should be was the real kicker.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought that, it would just be that the kids would do what I'd say, and I would move on, because I had to do what my parents said. Otherwise we've got to kick up the ass, or, maybe we were locked in our room or something. One of the thing that I suppose I learned along the way, so through my study, sort of after that time, because that was the time when I quit my job and I went, okay, I've got to do this better, because the look on my kids' faces was heartbreaking. I'm not proud of it, but I'm proud of what I'm doing now in terms of being able to change and wanting to change the story about how we talk about parenting. Because you're right, it wasn't about the kids' behavior. Their behavior was telling me that they had some needs. That's all. Behavior is communication. They were having needs. I didn't realize that my behavior was telling the same thing. I had needs. I had a need for certainty. I had a need to grieve, and I didn't recognize that. So what I have learnt is that there's often times when, especially when I'm reactive, and this was sort of something that came up, was why am I reacting like that? What is this actually pressing on? And through lots of my work and study, what I've learned is the one key question, and that is, am I responding to the child in front of me, or am I reacting to the child within me?
When I read that in your book, I straight away went, that's such a great question, and one impossible to answer when there is avocado toast upside down, the dogs are all over this, the bell's going to go in 6 minutes. I can't ask myself that question in that moment, and I'm hoping you're not expecting people to ask themselves a question in that moment.
Well, I suppose it's not the moment because it comes from awareness. So, we
Yeah.
wanna the very first thing, and this is the big myth about parenting, is that we know it, we're gonna get it right and it's perfect all the time. It's not. We don't live in a perfect world. We can't expect to be perfect. I think parents put so much pressure on themselves to have it right and get it right. The key is that if we do stuff it up, if we do lose our cool, yes, we recognize and we apologize to our children for that, and we repair. But the most important thing is that we then reflect on actually what was it about that moment. So not in the heat of the moment, because no one's really there. We're
Yeah.
just reactive.
Yeah.
But the time when you have away from that, and you know when that is because you feel bad. Like when you've yelled at your child, it doesn't feel good afterwards. You kind of go, "What? Why was I reacting like that? Like, did it really matter if the toast was upside down on the, whatever? It's a bit of avocado, but what was my reaction?" So away from the heat of the moment is really to ask yourself the questions: what was that really about? And in the book, I share some questions about that to help people reflect, because often those moments have pressed on something that I call heartprints. And our heartprints are those moments when we were little that we weren't heard, or we weren't seen, or we were dismissed, or something like that. So, earlier I talked about my own being sensitive and not feeling heard, it wasn't safe. So when my children don't listen to me, it really ignites something in me, my heartprint. And so I react from that heartprint. It's an old imprint.
It's like old lines of code from haven't been updated. It's software that's
Correct.
still running that like the hardware doesn't even match the situation anymore. You're twice as tall, twice as heavy, and it doesn't make sense that there's this 3-year-old version of you getting upset that someone's not listening and cannot conceive at all. It's like, no, they actually can't hear right now because that Lego thing, they're in a different planet right now. They are building a dragon which can roller skate, and they've invented a whole narrative. Of course they can't hear my voice. I can't think of that in the moment. It's
Exactly.
real. It's
Exactly.
the idea of the comparison thing. It used to be a lot easier, right? Because you could maybe pick up a parenting book and go, well, that's how that person does it, and you can leave it on the shelf. But in a day, you can go and see, an hour's worth of screen time of mums or dads doing it better than you with better lighting. It's nearly possible to just go, yeah, but that's not, there's probably 87 other photos they didn't post. Similarly, when we're in those moments, that can't be good for us to be looking at that kind of stuff and being exposed to this expectation that doesn't really fit what the world's about.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And that's what I call it, the perfect parent trap, is that we're exposed to all of this stuff that tells us that we should be doing it this way. We should be, looking like this, or we should be, my kid's doing this, this, and this, after school, and that we should all be doing that too. And so, there's this pressure that has built up. And, the research tells us now that, there's over like 40% of parents feel overwhelmed and anxious, and that impacts how they parent, and they're not parenting how they want to parent. So we've kind of moved away from what we out the heart, I suppose, of parenting, and the real things that matter. And I believe that parenting gives us a chance to do something extraordinary. However, we can repeat these kind of emotional patterns that we had when we were children if we're not aware of them. And so what I'm trying to sort of say is that parenting is not about doing more. It's not about comparing yourself to other parents and looking and seeing and thinking, well, I've got to do that too. It's actually about who are you being in this moment? What kind of parent are you being, and how aware are you of what's happening within you?
And what would you say the best way is to tune into answering those questions?
is to notice what do you really want to do. If we stripped away all the noise, I mean, the most important thing really is connection. How do we connect not only with ourselves but with our children? So I share 5 kind of qualities that I think are really important in families, and the first one is courage. Like, we have to have the courage to be able to look deep inside, and I know you know this work, Osher, that we look deep inside and find out what's happening for us, what's ticking for us. What's this heaviness I've got in my heart right now, when I'm watching my child or when I've yelled at my child? What is that? So having the courage to kind of look and think and feel what's happening for themselves and their nervous system. Children borrow our nervous system. So if we're feeling anxious, uptight, overwhelmed, then that's what they're going to be experiencing as well. So courage, connections, the next one. How are we connected with ourselves? How are we connected with our children? What are we doing time-wise to be able to be really present? And this is not rocket science, but it's about kind of actually stripping everything right back to the simple stuff. Curiosity also is that key for all of these things. We want to be really curious, not just about our kids' behavior, but about our own, maybe especially about our own, because that's kind of where the real gold is, when we can, have a dig around and kind of, wonder about our own behavior and exactly how are we being there for our child and what's that look like? What do they experience? And doing that with compassion and love. The whole point of this, really, all of these things, is thinking about parenting in a different way, thinking about it as a relationship rather than, just I'm the parent and you're the child. But actually, this is a relationship that we have to nurture and love and feed.
One of the things I like the idea of that you brought up in the book was kind of understanding where you're starting from, all right? Because for most days, it's going to be tired and overwhelmed because that's the gig. That's what it is. Also, full of more love than you can't even have words to use, all right? Because that's why you keep getting up the next day and doing it again, because it's like the most incredible kind of thing that and it's good that our brains do that because we probably wouldn't do it otherwise, but the reward out of it is as equal as the difficulty. So can we talk a little bit about the idea of, if we've understood that, oh, hang on a second, I might be reacting to something from when I was their age. Okay, then how do we go about kind of understanding where we're coming from and setting that baseline, which is what you talk about?
Yeah. So just asking some questions really around what is, and in the book there's a kind of a questionnaire that you can answer that kind of helps you to kind of look at where I am. And it's not about judgment and it's not about testing yourself and kind of see, well, who do I compare with? Because this is not about comparison, as you said. And then really kind of going, well, what do I want? What kind of relationships do I want to have with my child? What didn't I like from my own childhood that, I want to actually change? What's the legacy I want to leave, or the ripple effect I want to have for my kids? And this is a work in progress. This is a lifelong thing. My kids are, in their nearly early 20s now. And, I was having a conversation with my eldest daughter, who's 25. And I said to her, do you remember some times when I was really angry? And she goes, yeah, I just thought you were angry at me. And I was like, oh, that's like a hurt in my heart. But we had a really good conversation about it. And I said, do you understand now what was happening for me? And she said, yes, you were sad. I didn't know that. I just thought you were angry at me. And so her heartprint that I had caused was that she's, I'm not good enough and I've got to keep trying to be good enough. And so she's, has been an achiever. And so we were able to have a really good conversation about what I'd passed down to her, this idea of not being enough, and that kind of she didn't need to keep proving that she was enough, that was not her heartprint. That was probably something that was mine. So
I don't think there's any person listening who isn't either, because everyone's got a parent at some point, a parental figure in their life, and any parent listening, we've all had that. Like, everyone listening has got that moment where they go, oh man, like, yeah, that's going to get talked about in a therapy office that I'm not present for. Absolutely. Like, I know that one's going to that's going to the video ref, that one. Like, because like there's no idea, there's no, as you mentioned before, like there's no perfection in this gig. It is trying to be the best parent you can be. There's that. There's trying to help this young person grow up and have a great life. There's that. But there's certainly not a checklist of like, if your kid isn't doing, is not duck to the school and, captain of the first netball team and da-da-da, then you failed. Back to the level 1.
Yeah.
Off you go.
Yeah, unfortunately, we don't get to do it again. But we do get to, I think that's why this book means so much, because I want parents to be able to just pause and know that, and kind of think about what's happening for them in the moment, because that's the really precious part of being human, is that we will get things wrong. We will overreact. We overthink things. I'm a big overthinker. And so, the anxiety that sometimes that caused my kids as well, I was doing the best I can, still am.
Sometimes when I'm in it, I don't realize it, but my voice changes. And sometimes I can accidentally have some sort of a thunderous voice or a sneering voice. And it's really scary if you're 6. Can we talk about, like, if we understand we're in it and we're still flooded with all this business, what are some non-verbal ways that we can, if we recognize ourselves in a situation, what are some non-verbal ways that we can perhaps handle a situation without running the risk of saying something that may come out wrong?
Yeah, great question. So one of the things that's really important, I think, is what I call the courage pause. And that's just to just kind of stop for a second and just take a big deep breath and just really kind of noticing that breath coming in, having a moment to just think, okay, what's really happening here for me? You generally, your heart's racing, you're breathing fast. I have a tone that my kids pick up on. That's
yeah.
Yeah.
We've all got it.
Yeah. So, even noticing when you're kind of doing that, but stopping and pausing and just thinking. So there's often something that's happened. There's an event or something that's happening in front of you that's triggering something old. So taking a breath, being curious about what that is. Is this present now or is this old stuff? And then choosing, like we get to choose in these moments. And I know that sometimes when we're really hot and heavy in kind of the fullness of whatever's going on, that our brain isn't doing its best thinking. But taking a breath, even taking a break, like walking away and just saying, okay, I just need to go and get a drink of water. But get out of that space, out of that situation, move your body, something that's going to, break kind of the pattern of that you're in that moment.
And I guess, getting down on their level a bit, sometimes if it's really a peak moment, just showing them that you're willing to be with the big feeling that's happening for them, whatever it is. Like, I really did tell you, like, there's no more watching glitch techs. That's it. We're done. I'm mentioning shows because you got older kids now. Like, I'm not going to give you the Wi-Fi password today. It's not going to happen. Yeah. We talked about this. I'm happy to sit here with you and be with you in this big feeling, but we're not going to, it's not like,
yeah,
rather than just leave them with it.
But it's the beautiful, what you're talking about, Osher, is that beautiful presence, right? Like the presence to stay, and even just to say, I don't really know what to say now, darling. Like I know you really love playing that game. I get it. I know you do, but this is what's going to happen. So kind of love, like people think boundaries are kind of, we're kind of mean and we've got to be, they're whatever, but actually boundaries are built from love. Like we have to love them that much. Yeah, I kind of, parents that are, with this social media ban, and I say to them, well, how's the ban going with the children? And they'll go, oh no, we're still on it. They haven't shut us down yet.
They've figured out around it. Or they've figured ways around it.
Yeah, but I'm like, well, okay, hang on. What conversations have you had about this with your kids? Like, because this is about their brain. This is about their brain, their health, their future. What's the loving conversations that you're having about that?
Speaking of boundaries, you've got kids that are older, late teens, early 20s, so you probably haven't had too much time with the Healer family, but I can tell you that Bandit Healer Bluey's dad, he has this great line when the kids are, yeah, but I really wanted this. He says, I know you did, mate.
Yeah.
And it's just, I want to cry. I just think Joe Brum, who wrote the show, is a complete genius. But just, I know you do, mate. And I'm so grateful that I heard that, because I model my life off Bennett Healer, really. Because it's like, yeah, I get it. Like, there's not ignoring it,
No.
but we're going to continue together from here without that thing. And it's just such a, yeah, it's really beautiful.
It's the beautiful listening, like the presence, like being present enough to listen to what's happening for the child. Because when we want to go, well, come on, just get off it now. I've told you, 1,000 times. That's us looking for control. So we're choosing control in that moment, which comes from fear, right? It's a fear of, if I don't do this, what's going to happen now? So we got to choose as parents. Do we want to parent from fear and control, or do we want to parent from love?
There's a quote in your book that I quite liked. The most profound gift you can give your children isn't a childhood free of conflict. It's the lived experience that love survives mistakes, that repair is always possible, and that being imperfect is part of being beautifully human. You mentioned the rupture repair process. Can you maybe talk about what that looks like? And, because we're all going to lose it. Can you talk about what that repair can look like?
Yeah, I mean that's the thing, right? We're not robots. We get it wrong. We stuff it up. We're human. We react. So it's called the anatomy of repair in the book. And the thing is that when we show children that we can repair, that we got things wrong, what we actually say to them is, it's okay to make mistakes. You're going to get it wrong. Sometimes you're going to get angry and you might yell, you might say things that you don't mean. But if we model that repairing and we own what's ours, that's really important. So the first part is to acknowledge what's happened. I realize I raised my voice before, or I said something really awful, and I want to apologize, and owning that part, and then connecting with the child or with whoever you're repairing to. This doesn't necessarily just happen for children, but to say things like, I imagine that must have felt really scary for you, or I'm wondering if you might have felt disappointed in that moment, or, just kind of really empathizing with them, so that what we want them to understand is we know how it must have felt. So we're really owning what's ours. And then the last bit is, I want to try and do it differently, or could we just try that again? Or can we talk about it later if you're still feeling something, upset about that? But I think the most important part is that we acknowledge that we got it wrong.
Why is it so hard, though, as a parent to apologize to a kid without using the word but? I'm really sorry about this and that, but this is what happens when you don't bleh.
Well, I think it's this traditional parenting model, right? We've been told that parents, I'm big, you're small. I know everything, you know nothing. You have to do what I say because I've got all the power, and you need to ask me for things. But the reality of it is that that's not really the way relationships work. Relationships are about looking after each other, about understanding each other, and about being present and being present enough to notice what's happening for the other person and also what's happening for yourself.
We're talking a lot about, the direct experience of a parent, and I think it's important to realize that we may be of an age where, like you said, one of your kids is nearly 25. That's like, there's a very high chance that one of their friends is going to have a baby, and the next, 1 or 2 years, they'll be out. And then now there's a 2-year-old in a situation. They've got no experience with a 2-year-old, and they're watching a full meltdown. So it's important that people, if they've never heard these kind of concepts, to have a bit of a think about it, even though they're perhaps not a parent themselves. And in thinking about that, you write in the book that it's important to also understand what an iceberg is. Now, could we talk a bit about what the meltdown of a child over here is and what that has to do with an iceberg?
Absolutely. So when we think about behavior, right? So what we see is what's above the waterline. So if you think about an iceberg, we only see a tiny little bit of an iceberg. We see lots of water, but underneath, like the Titanic found out, there is a big expanse of stuff happening underneath the water. So we might see a child slamming a door, or hear a child slam a door, or we might see them crying, we might see them yelling, we might see them saying, lots of terrible things. And underneath, what we want to think about is what's really going on, because what's going on underneath is something like, I'm tired, I'm frightened, I'm scared, I'm unhappy, I'm sad, I'm embarrassed, I'm overwhelmed. So lots of feelings happening underneath. And what we really want to notice is not so much what's happening above the water or what we're seeing. So it'll be what we're seeing, what we're hearing. What we want to think about is what's happening underneath. Words only make up 7% of our language. And so often we're so focused on what people are saying, but that's nothing. What we really want to think about is what else is going on. So we don't address the behavior as such. We look at the behavior and go, oh, here's some information, something's going on, and then we've got to go underneath and think about what's happening for this person or this child, and even asking, I can see that your face is really red right now, and you're saying lots of big words. What's happening for you right now? So we're really thinking about what's going on underneath the behavior.
We've talked about when they're kind of little and for the most part, you can kind of not necessarily dictate, but shape the concepts and the shared communication that you have around behavior. But once they get to school and start seeing different ways of responding to stress or different ways of dealing with big feelings, how do you have that conversation with a 14-year-old who's taller than you?
The same way that you probably nearly would. I mean, not the same way, but you don't often rush in with teenagers particularly and kind of go, right, what's going on here? Because they often need time to process stuff. We've got to remember what's going on in their brain. They're doing lots of building of stuff is happening. So their vocabulary and verbal capacity is reduced. So we want to give them some time, but at a no problem time, you might knock on the door and go in and say, hey, babe, I just noticed that, before you were really angry and I want to just check in. Are you okay? What's happening? What do you need from me right now? It's a tricky time. I get it. How can I support you?
When we do practice this cycle and we demonstrate to our kids that if mum or dad does lose it for a sec, that's not a permanent state. What does it do for the brains that are growing? What does it develop in them when we show them this cycle?
It gives them the freedom to know that they can then also make mistakes, that they're going to get it wrong, that they're going to lose their cool, they're going to say things that they don't mean perhaps. But it gives them the opportunity to come to you when things are tricky or when they have stuffed up, because they know that it's okay to get it wrong, that it's okay to make mistakes. They've seen mum and dad do it. They've seen mum and dad come and say, oh, you know what, I really, I messed that up. So that after the heat of the moment for them, they might come back and say, oh, look, mum, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to say what I said, and then in the repair comes this beautiful strength that gets, stronger. When there's been a rupture and we repair it, just like any kind of bone, maybe, that it gets stronger.
In your answer there, you paraphrased an imaginary child who was quite verbose, saying, oh, I'm sorry, mum, I didn't mean that, which is probably more words in one sentence than kids say from anywhere between the age of 11 and 26. So how do you have these conversations when they're in that, when they're stranded on monosyllabic island, which is fine. It's what part of their development goes. How do you have those conversations when it's just grunts?
Yeah, it's a good question. And so this is where we come back to control and fear, right? How control and fear kind of want to step in, because what we have to notice is what's happening in ourselves when our children are withdrawing a little bit, especially through those teenage years, and there's not much language happening. We want to reach in and check if they're okay, but we also want to check if we're okay. Like, is our relationship okay? Are they going to be all right? What's going to happen? But trust has to step in here a little bit. We have to trust that we've put enough love, enough of what we've already done in our parenting career, if you like, that we've got that relationship, that they've got our values, that we've been living our values, and that our children have picked those up along the way, because that's what happens in families. When they become teenagers, they go outside into the world, like you said, and they look at other people's values and they go, oh, I might go and try that on. And sometimes those values aren't the same as yours, and that's okay. They generally try them on and go, oh, that's probably not who I want to be, and come back. So I think the important thing is to really have some compassion too for what they're going through. It's a tricky time. Physiologically, it's tricky. There's so much happening for them. When we tighten our grip and we put in more control and we say, you can do this, you can't do this, and they feel the pressure from us, it only intensifies what's happening for them. So what we want to do is actually just really think about, how can I support you right now? What do you need? Sometimes when my teenager, one of my son is gaming and I know he's stressed and he's, got stuff going on with his friends, I'll just deliver a toasted cheese sandwich, and kind of check in and go, how's it going, buddy? How are you? Just how do we actually love them even more rather than tightening our grip and wanting to control them?
That's quite the power up. But they're never gonna give you kudos in the chat. They're never gonna say on the mic, "Oh, Mum just gave me a toasted cheese sandwich," when they're in the middle of some giant, Gears of War campaign. Like it's just not going to happen.
But also, Osher, like I don't need it to happen, because I know that in those moments I'm just being the best loving mum that I can be. In that moment.
Let's say, just to explore the concept, they'll see other things that other kids are doing, as you mentioned before. Sometimes they'll try them out and go, no, that's not for me. What can we do as parents when that starts to happen and, the phone just gets turned off? This phone that they fought so hard for, you don't know where they are. They're incommunicado. They go missing. Like, where do you go from there, even if you've done everything right?
Yeah. Look, you're never going to be able to control everything. That's the simple fact. But it's how you respond when that is happening. So maybe a conversation about when your phone is off and you're out late at night. I feel really worried. Actually, I feel really panicked because there's so many things that could go wrong and you are so precious to me. What can we do, or what plan could we have so that I know at least that you're safe? I don't need to know exactly what's going on. I don't need to, because being, I get you're learning to be independent and all of that. But for me, I need to know something, I need to have that reassurance. So what could we do?
When you are, though, a parent, and I get it, you want your kids to like you, I still, like, she's 22. I still want her to like me. What would you say to parents who don't want, they want their kid to like them, but might inadvertently be setting them up for failure?
Well, I suppose what I would say firstly is your children are not always going to like you. That's it. Hopefully they love you, but they're not always going to like you. And, that whole kind of letting your children do anything and everything doesn't serve anyone, because children need us to guide them. The prefrontal lobe is not fully developed until 28 now. Is that what we're saying? So, kids are going to make mistakes. We are the ones that have to go. Sometimes there's a natural consequence to things. Going out drinking, not knowing where you are, losing your phone. There's lots of natural consequences that happen. So I think the thing is remembering that it's a relationship. Kids will make mistakes. They will get it wrong. Being a permissive parent and allowing them to do everything so that they like you is not healthy for any relationship. Discipline, the word discipline really means teaching. We have to teach our children, what is right and wrong in the world. That's our job, to guide them.
We have this interesting relationship with the word discipline, in that we relate it to punitive punishment. And you and I spoke earlier about, corporal punishment, like getting the strap at school, which I got when I was younger. But that's not necessarily discipline. Discipline can also be, here is an expectation, there is a consequence, let's work so that happens again and again and again, and we can both understand that goes on.
Correct. And discipline is not so much about I'm big and you're small, I'm right and you're wrong. There has to be conversations that happen about it too. Our 15-year-old was, I'm the only boy in my age who doesn't have a PlayStation, and I'm like, yes, you're welcome. Your brain is so precious, honey. There's rules about what you can play and what you can't play. Rules for a reason. The same conversations we had about alcohol. There is a reason that children under 18 aren't allowed to drink alcohol. I didn't make the rule, but this is the rule. The rule is that it hurts children's brain. It actually hurts adults' brains. This is the conversation that we need to have about why I'm not going to buy alcohol for you like the other mums do. I had a conversation with a friend of mine who was, she was saying that some of her friends had bought drugs for their kids. And she was like, why would they be doing that? And we had a conversation about when parents think they're helping, it's actually their own stuff that they're really pressing on here. So here's some heartprint stuff around, why is it so hard for me to say no to my child? Am I afraid of, that's right, I'm not going to be loved? So a heartprint for that parent may have been, when I was a little girl, my parents gave me everything and that was the only way that I felt loved. And when they didn't give me stuff, then I didn't feel like I was loved. So there's a heartprint there. So for parents to check in and go, when we're making these decisions or we're not doing what we know parents should do, that's actually not about our child, that's about us.
Oh man, scoring drugs for your kid. Well, I'm doing it so they don't have the dealer's number in their phone. You see, this is the logic of the situation. Like,
so I know it's safe, I think was the
that one's beyond
I know
me.
where they're getting it from.
No. So we've spoken about the rupture and repair. We've spoken about checking in with ourselves. What are some things otherwise that families do as a regular routine, as a habit, to kind of help make a foundation for this sort of stuff to occur?
Well, it's not going to be, I'm not inventing the wheel here. It's the simple things. It's actually the simple things. How do we spend time together? How do we have conversations about big things, about difficult things? How do we do tricky conversations when, we need to repair or when we need to challenge some behaviour? So all of those things, I think, look, you can't beat eating dinner around the table. It's where children learn conversation. They learn about what's happening in everybody else's world as well. So they're not just thinking they're the only person in the family. All of those things that connect us really beautifully are the things that are really important. Bike rides, just simple stuff. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to go on a, $1 million holiday to connect. You can do that, playing around the table. Where as the kids get older, they still want to spend time with you. Our kids have always wanted to spend time with us. Generally, it's if we're paying, but even just little holidays. It doesn't have to be big. It's the simple stuff. It's the moments of deep connection and deep conversation that you get to have. Walking on the beach, taking the dog for a walk.
Thank you so much for writing this book, and I'm grateful we got the chance to speak today. It was really cool.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here, and I'm also wanted to acknowledge all of the conversations that you have and that you invite people to have with real depth and real vulnerability, because there's so much busyness and noise in the world, and I just think that what you're doing here on the podcast is incredible.
Oh, thanks. I'll try. I just trying to give what was given to me, and I'm very happy to have as many different angles as possible, because these things have been worked out by people smarter than us, and all we need to do is hear them once and go, I might give that a go, and then you feel it for yourself and go, wow, what do you know?